What's going on, guys? Good evening to you. Saturday night, apparently a big fantasy college football day. I wouldn't know. I know it was Ohio State, Michigan. I caught like one quarter of that game, but yeah, I haven't watched much. So you guys will have to let me know if anything cool and fantasy relevant was happening. But we're here to talk a little bit about the 2025 rookie class, looking back on it, um, trying to answer this question that Cole sent me that's been turning around in my head for a couple days. Austin, what's up? Jared, Nico. I'm not sure I know who Korean Jesus 01 is in the Discord, but it looks like he's been a member for a long time, so I'm sure I know you, but I'm not matching it to the Discord name. Arlen is here. He says, "Go OSU." Who actually won the game, guys? I genuinely don't know because I'm assuming Ohio State would win it, but I did not watch the end. I took some notes ahead of this one to try to be a little bit more prepared. Hopefully, you guys don't mind that these are a little bit spur of the moment, a little bit improvised, more pure potential, unscripted. But I did write down some thoughts because it was a bit of a complicated topic. I also was going to show a trade that I made today, talk about that, because I know some of you guys still have leagues with where the deadlines haven't passed yet. And I'm sure many of you have leagues that don't have deadlines. So show you a win now trade I made today and kind of talk through it. I also wanted to share some takeaways from a really good article from Jacob Sanderson's Substack. Just consider it free advertising, I guess. I really enjoy his takes on Dynasty and how he thinks through the game. And this piece he wrote about deadline trades was really interesting to me. So I just wanted to share some of the big takeaways from that. I'm trying to start looking into 2026 prospects a little bit earlier this year. I'm doing my best. I went ahead and made a spreadsheet with like all of the major prospect names, at least the ones that we know right now, based on other dynasty rookie rankings that are already out there and some mock drafts, early mock drafts I've looked at from, the big sites. So I've written down like 46 prospects that I'm going to try to start looking into. I just threw all their names and positions and schools and ages and stuff into a spreadsheet, and hopefully I can start kind of collecting some information. But one thing I was asked about as part of Cole's question. So Cole Klanger, for those of you that are not on a first name basis, definitely one of our sharper members. He asked me, he said a fun topic would be evaluating prospect and draft pick processes, things that you think worked well last year or things you learned that you will incorporate into your prospect/market eval, i.e. if buying into your perceived tiers prior to rookie draft season was worth it, or trading down from 101, or when to start moving rookie picks as a team with excess draft capital, et cetera, et cetera. So like I said, I'm going to do my best to respond to this kind of broadly and then maybe more specifically. As far as the prospecting process, I would say that's one of the weaker points of my game as an analyst. I don't think my takes on prospects are bad, but I'm not really taking a lot of the credit for how I get to those takes. Like the way that I analyze prospects is, I'll go look into them myself. I will learn all there is to learn about their background, try to find the context of their production, look at some of the surface level stuff, the per out stuff, how they progress throughout their college career, kind of learn the story of their college career. But a lot of my actual takes and how I rank these guys, it leans very heavily on draft capital, which I think it should. But then I rely heavily on the work of people like JJ Zacharyson, who he has this incredibly complex model that he has worked on for years and years. He has all these inputs, it spits out scores, it does very well year over year. I don't have a model. I don't know how to make one. I don't have the personal expertise to do that. And even if I did, if I could find out how to do that, or, I've played around with some metrics and stuff, but even if I did, I kind of doubt that the time put into it would be enough of a value add above what people like JJ Zacharyson are already doing. So I haven't made a very serious effort to do that because I don't think we need to reinvent the wheel. I think what I do is I look at what these other analysts have discovered about these prospects through data, and then I try to look at that from the dynasty lens and from the fantasy lens of like, how is this going to pan out, looking at landing spots? How is this going to pan out looking at what type of player they are, right? We lean into rushing quarterbacks. We lean into pass catching running backs, that type of stuff, right? Why was I kind of off of Caleb Johnson? Well, situational factors, right? What was the upside for him realistically? Not much of a pass catcher in college, right? So there were things that kind of steered me away from that prospect, even though I wasn't the one who specifically was putting all the numbers into a spreadsheet, a database, and then spitting out scores. So maybe someday when I have the infrastructure, maybe I have the time, I have maybe some help, maybe there will be a pure potential prospect model that can rival the Dynasty Domain bakery. But I would say right now, I like to take what my favorite analysts are saying, along with JJ Zacharyson, people like Jacob Sanderson, Pat Kerrane. I've been kind of interested in like Dwayne McFarland, his prospect profile or prospect model as well. Just trying to synthesize all that information and bring to you guys like the most reasonable conclusions I can draw based on that. So just want to be transparent. And my prospecting process is very much propped up by other analysts. And I'm not ashamed of that, but that's just the reality of the situation. Max, what's up? I see some people trickling in here. Max and HMAR 7163. Nick Damon says deadline tomorrow. A lot of trades been going down last minute. I have some leagues with deadlines. They're technically after Monday Night Football, which is, I'm guessing, when yours would be. I haven't seen that many deals. Definitely a few, but not as many as I would hope. And I tried to put a lot of players on the block, and I've tried to get some stuff going, and people are just not responding. A trade actually just got completed in one of my leagues, but it's not a deadline league. Wow, that's horrible. Oh my gosh. That's a crazy trade. This is a full point tight end premium league, so it makes it like slightly more understandable, but Justin Herbert was just traded away for Oronde Gadsden and TJ Hawkinson and a fourth. I don't know about that one, Chief. Got to be honest with you. I mean, I guess the upside for Gadsden is pretty high in a 1.0 tight end premium, but I would not be trading away. I wouldn't trade Justin Herbert for that. All right. Let me continue here. Nico, I did not see your Lamar deals. Did you buy Lamar Jackson? I'm guessing it was in the trade channel. I got to be honest, I don't check that as often as I do some of the other channels, just because it's a little bit overwhelming. I typically wait until I've been tagged. So I did not see any Lamar deals. Arlen, what would you do with JJ as a contender? Hope that Max Brosmer is good. I don't know. It's tough, right? Like, you don't have that many different options that you feel really good pivoting to. Amon-Ra's hurt now. I think tearing down to Rashee Rice, if you can get a plus on top, I think moving Jefferson for Rice in a second is pretty defensible. Because I think even if you have some long-term concerns with Rice, I think the market value for him outside of any kind of an injury is going to hold pretty strong through the offseason. You could also, if you don't need a wide receiver specifically, you could look cross position, see about Trey McBride in a tight end premium and see how available he is. Try tiering up. I just don't know who's moving like Chase, Puka, JSN right now. Probably not a lot of people. I don't know. I'm still beating myself up about trading Jamar Chase basically straight up for Justin Jefferson in a league. I think about it all the time, and it is very frustrating that the production is just not there with Jefferson. I genuinely, like, unironically think it could be better with Max Brosmer than with McCarthy. Whether or not Brosmer keeping the job is realistic, I don't know. Probably not, but it's tough. I do think with JJ, because of the fact that he's going to be 27 next year, and we have no idea who the Vikings quarterback is going to be, I guess I'm less wary of tearing down further to a lower level of asset, like tearing down to like George Pickens with a plus on top. You're not going to get a first on top, though. That's the problem. Are you ever going to feel great about sending Jefferson for Pickens in 2 seconds? I don't know. It's hard to stomach that. I think realistically with Jefferson, based on how he's going to be valued by most people, unless there's like a rebuilding team that wants to take him on, is you're probably just going to have to suck it up and just hope he's better in the playoffs and hope that he's not the difference, because he's still so good. He's not the type of asset you want to sell low. Austin, I like that Bowers deal. You just want to flex it again. Nico says sold Mahomes for Lamar straight up on a reloading roster. Love that. The other one was sold Lawrence, AJ Brown, and the 106 for Lamar and a second. Okay. Earliest the pick could be. Okay. Yeah, I like that. Excuse me. Yeah. It's like, 3/4 for $1 basically. Late first, mid first for Lamar. I think in most situations you're pretty happy about that. Dude, this is such a hard question to answer. How likely do you think JJ McCarthy is to stay the starter? If he either just gets permanently benched for the rest of this year or comes back this year and looks just as bad as he has looked, I think the odds are pretty low that he's the starter next year. I think he's going to get Josh Rosen, because this team is good. Like, it has the pieces. Kevin O'Connell is going to want to win now. I don't think the team is going to feel the need. He wasn't the number 1 overall pick, right? He was the 10th pick or whatever. That's not the same level of investment. You don't have to stick it out and develop that guy. So I think the only way he's the starter next year is if he shows some legitimate strides to end the year. And I just would not bank on it. What happens after he gets benched, I don't know. He's probably just kind of Trey Lance, like he just hangs around and he's the backup for a little while, and then maybe he gets traded somewhere else for a late pick that wants to take a shot on him, and he becomes a project quarterback that floats around, kind of like Zach Wilson, whatever. That's what I'd say is most likely, and that's why he's moved down so much and probably will continue to move down. Candy Bar is here. Scotty is here. Sold JJ and Warren for Neighbors. Their 2026 first and a second. That has to be Tyler Warren, right? Oh wait, no, you said Jalen Warren. That's insane. What the hell, dude? That's insane. You did that this year? Yeah, you should feel great. I don't care about your heart, dude. That's an amazing trade. JJ and Warren for Neighbors, a top 4 pick and a second. That's truly unreal stuff. That's a big time win. All right. I'm going to continue on with Cole's question about my rookie draft process. That's something I definitely take a lot more ownership of than the prospecting process. And the rookie draft process, it's hard to really condense it down into anything too exact, because really every league is going to be a little bit different in terms of how rookie picks are valued, how hard it is to trade up or down, what your team needs. So I wouldn't say I was doing like just one thing or the other when it comes to navigating rookie drafts. I will say I had a lot of 101s in rookie drafts because I was pretty successful on teams that were tanking at getting that first pick. I drafted Ashton Genty in seven of my 26 rookie drafts. I drafted Ashton Genty, so that was pretty much all of my tanking teams, maybe all but one. Actually, they weren't even all tanking teams. I think I bought a couple of 101s after the season. Yeah, I wasn't tanking in this league. This one was a startup where I drafted the 101 as a startup pick. Yeah, so I had a couple tankers, and then I had a couple just trade-ins. And and then otherwise, my other top 4 picks, it looks like I took Hampton 4 times. I took McMillan 3 times. I took Hunter 3 times. And this was just sort of one tier that I had, right? 2, 3, 4. I had Hunter second, Hampton third, Tet fourth. And I was just sort of playing the board, whatever was left to me. I got Hampton at the 102. I took Hampton at the 102 in a points per carry league. And then I took him at the 103, the 104. And I took him at the 102 also in a half PPR league where I also got Hunter at the 104. Now, if we're talking about misses, I would say Travis Hunter at 102, it has to be considered a miss looking back. And I think that we can say that was a mistake. I like to classify anytime something goes wrong, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that a bad decision was made. Sometimes variance just happens. Things don't go the way you expect. I think this one's on the line for me about whether Hunter was a good 102. And I think looking back, my take is probably would have been better to just have Hampton and Tet there because they were just more traditional prospects that were also very strong. And I think it was a little bit too cute with Hunter, where maybe you can make the argument, and I think I did make the argument, that the absolute ceiling was highest with Hunter. It's really hard to prove that now, and it probably just didn't matter enough to make that the tiebreaker when you had to deal with the non-traditional, the two-way player stuff. And in the end, I don't even know how much the two-way player stuff really mattered. There was like one game where he stopped running routes because he was playing defense a bunch because of a cornerback injury. But ultimately, like, he started out in a gimmicky role because he didn't know the position, which I guess was a virtue of playing defense. And then as he ramped up, he did eventually start doing real wide receiver stuff. I think he would have broken out in the second half here, and he might have even been eventually in the same tier with McMillan had he not gotten injured. His injury was pretty random, didn't have anything to do with playing two ways. So all in all, I don't really feel bad about having him in the tier. But again, I think it was probably too cute to put him ahead of Hampton as that round 1 running back and ahead of McMillan, who was also a top 10 pick at wide receiver, also great production in college, just had a much more straightforward path to succeeding right away. So I see some comments here. Yeah, Nico, absolutely. He's more injury prone. See, look what happened. Yeah. Like, that stuff is so stupid to me. Players get hurt in practice randomly all the time. And it's just people confirming their priors that want to put that on it. But he actually played like the same number of snaps as Ted McMillan in games. So, and Hampton was hurt too. So yeah. Max Drescher says, not bad process. Yeah. Like, I'm not beating myself up over it because, again, I had a reason for it. I saw the vision. I think he was a great player. But, again, I just think there were more ways for it to go wrong. And I think all 3 of these guys should have been viewed as like very high upside, high value potential type of players. And I think even just a tiebreaker of like, there are enough people within the dynasty market that are not going to value Hunter as highly because they're concerned about the injury risks or because they don't think he's a real wide receiver. Even that, just the market concern right there, the resaleability, the tradability, the asset could have been enough to sway you to go Hampton or McMillan because you just might have more flexibility with that piece. So I think that is what I would say is my first miss. Nate, to answer your question from earlier, I think I had 101 on all but one of my tanking teams. I feel like you've asked that a couple of times. I'm not sure if there's like a reason for the question. If I'm tanking, I'm doing my best to try to get that pick. Sometimes it's just not realistic. Maybe you start too late. You realize you're out of the mix too late and you don't have the chance. Maybe you have a pretty strong team of like elite assets that you don't want to break up. Yeah. So I think I had one tanking team, maybe two, where I ended up not getting that early pick. All right. Let me continue. Arlen says, what do the difference between Tet and Hunter warrants if you're already looking to next year? I'm not sure what the question is there. Are you asking like, what is the gap? Like, how would I value them differently? So I would value them very differently now because whether or not Hunter would have broken out, we don't know. McMillan has already done it. Like we know for sure locked in. He is an excellent potential, probably elite, borderline elite right now, wide receiver. All signs point up for McMillan. Whereas Hunter, we have to go the whole offseason of like the team trying to figure out how they're going to use him when he comes back. Are they going to scale back usage? Are they going to do this or that? I think he'll ultimately still be a majority offense player. I think if they decide to limit him to one side of the ball, it's going to be offense, but you can't value him at this point. Like he has already broken out. We got one really good game. So, no, I think you still have to put a pretty big gap between them. If someone was going to offer me a first, I would definitely be willing to tear down from Tet to Hunter. I think Hunter plus a first, like that's a pretty fair offer. Is it fair to be afraid of Hunter getting injured because of his small frame alone? Jaden Daniels showed he can't stay healthy. I think for me to buy into this, and maybe it has happened and I haven't seen it, I would need to see some evidence that this even matters. Because I hear people talk about this, and like I guess you might think that it's intuitive, like, oh, small players get hurt more. But like which injuries specifically are we attributing to size? Because like Jaden Daniels, okay, he's small, and so it's easier for him to get thrown around. But ultimately, like the reason he got hurt is because he was getting tackled and he decided to try to catch his entire body weight with his elbow. Like that seems more of a play style issue than a size issue. If you just don't do that, if you don't try to run through linebackers, then you probably won't get hurt. I don't know. He's 185 pounds. Like, is that really a size we're that concerned about for a wide receiver? I'm not really concerned about a wide receiver being 185 pounds. I think that's pretty fine. He's barely any lighter than Devon Achane. I know he's taller, but like, I don't know. I personally do not put any stock into that argument. I don't know if there's merit to it or not. Again, I would just love to see someone do a study on like wide receiver BMI and injury rates, if that's a thing. Because the injury that Travis Hunter suffered had absolutely nothing to do with his size. He just like tweaked his knee in a practice rep. So yeah, that's just my take. Yeah, this too, like Justin Jefferson is built very similarly to Travis Hunter. All right. What are your thoughts on Daniels going forward? I moved him over Mahomes. My thoughts on Daniels are pretty much the same, just about the same as they've been. The reason that I haven't moved him up, like he's coming back, he's closer and closer to coming back, and we have fewer and fewer weeks left in the season. So I'm trying to look more ahead with the rankings. The reason I haven't moved him up as high as I did before is because one, he just didn't make any real strides this year. Like I think most people would say that he looked worse this year than last year. I'm not concerned about him having some kind of huge CJ Stroud type regression. It's really an organizational thing. The Washington Commanders are a super old team that you have Ertz aging out, you have Debo aging out, McLaurin's going to be 31 next year. I don't have a ton of faith in this offensive infrastructure to lead to something really elite in the near future. The offensive line was deteriorating as well. Like Laramie Tunsil, not as good as he used to be. So I think with Daniels, the upside is still extremely high, and he's still very young. So I want to buy into him. But kind of similar with May coming into the year, it was like, okay, Drake May can be awesome, but can the pieces around him really support that? And I think we saw this year that there were some serious limitations, especially when McLaurin was hurt with this personnel. So yeah, I would take him over Mahomes in a vacuum if I was rebuilding. I would take him ahead of Hurts, but I'm also not sure he's going to be like right back in the conversation with Allen and I guess Lamar next year at the top of the seasonal rankings. All right, let me keep talking about rookies here for a second. What else were we doing at rookie draft time? I promise I'm not going to talk through every pick I made in rookie drafts, but actually, let me go over to this view. So I took this screenshot because I guess I forgot to save a picture of my rookie tiers. These were post-draft rookie tiers. You can see we had Genty in the 101 spot, and then we had those three guys we just talked about. Then we had a little mini tier of Cam Ward and TreVeyon Henderson. I will say, fading Cam Ward, obviously I didn't fade him hard enough, but at least fading him past those three skill guys, I do feel good about that. He was a non-mobile rookie quarterback prospect going into a bad situation. I pointed that out in the fades video that he wasn't going into one of these, Mick Shanahan style of offenses where it was going to be easier for him to succeed. And again, he wasn't a rusher, so there wasn't a lot of reason to invest in him super highly, especially because there were a lot of quarterbacks that were very attainable at reasonable prices. So feel good about the slight fade on Cam Ward, and then having Henderson a tier above the rest of these guys. It aged very poorly early in the season, and it has aged less poorly of late. Obviously, we have Igbuka ahead of him right now. We have Warren ahead of him. We had Judkins ahead of him for much of the season. I have flipped them. I would rather have Henderson than Judkins in Dynasty right now pretty easily. I think process-wise, fine with that one. Again, he was a really good pass catching prospect, supposed to be a really good pass protector based on what we saw in college. Didn't translate immediately. Was it foreseeable that Vrabel and McDaniels would be boomers about the usage? Maybe. That's something I was not sold on. It was also, I just wasn't as familiar with, I guess. I don't know. Maybe that was foreseeable. I think it was a little bit, it was like a level of boomerism that I think was hard to foresee. Like maybe you give it a couple weeks, but like playing Antonio Gibson over him, the fumbles, like not putting him in after the fumbles, like some of it was just really bizarre. And then looking into this late first tier, like there's some good and some bad here. I think Igbuka over Judkins ended up being a pretty sharp take. Having Loveland not only ahead of Warren, but at the top of this tier and 2 spots ahead of Tyler Warren maybe wasn't as sharp. I think that we have seen this gap close between them, but we saw Warren get off to a fast start. We saw Loveland get off to a slow start. I'd love to talk a little bit about that though. And this isn't just me trying to cope and like make up for bad takes. It's interesting how things aged for these two players, because with Warren, remember at the time of this ranking, the assumption was Anthony Richardson is the starting quarterback of the Colts. And, they have Daniel Jones as the backup, I guess, whatever. And last time we saw Daniel Jones, he was terrible. We were high on Josh Downs as a talent. We knew Pittman was coming back and he was going to be healthier this year. And then we had some other pieces that weren't maybe as intimidating in A.D. Mitchell and Alec Pierce. And then you look at Loveland where, okay, they have Rome Odunze, they have DJ Moore, but Rome Odunze struggled as a rookie. DJ Moore was terrible last year. Cole Kmet is a Jag. I think the narratives for these two players, I think it made some sense to like the year one outlook for Loveland a little bit better than Warren. And I also liked the talent there with Loveland as well. But I think maybe the key difference here is that Warren was an older prospect, year 5 player, coming off of this massively productive season, maybe we should have foreseen that Loveland was going to be more of a slow developer because he had an offseason injury, because he was such a young prospect, and that Warren maybe was the guy we should have picked to get off to a fast start. But again, it's really hard. It's really hard for me to see him getting off to a fast start if Anthony Richardson was his starting quarterback. And that's the part that is really hard for me going back to it, to say, like, would I have done anything differently? I don't know. Nico points out there was talk about his utilization, the staff loving him. I mean, that's true, but we also had Colston Loveland getting first team reps in August. And then Cole Kmet came out and he was the starter for a month and a half. So I don't know. I don't know how much we're supposed to buy into that, because if we bought into the Warren talk, then shouldn't we have bought into Colston Loveland as the starting tight end for the Bears? I certainly bought into that, and it did not pan out that way. So it's just really hard. I think you're never going to get away from these types of, reading the situation wrong. I still don't think the book is written on these two players. I don't think it's crazy that Loveland could one day be ranked right next to where Warren is, or even ahead. Ultimately, all of Warren's skills that he showed in his last year in college translated, and he was a big hit. I'm glad I kept them in the same tier, because they obviously needed to be. But again, I don't feel really that badly that I ranked the earlier college producer who was younger, who got drafted higher, to what should have, I thought, been a better passing game with a better coach, that I ranked that player higher. I don't really chalk that up as a big miss. The interesting player in this tier is RJ Harvey, because he just hasn't really done anything. And that he'll actually tie into, I think, a much larger conversation that I want to have, which is maybe one of the bigger takeaways from this class. I really try to avoid making too many big takeaways from one rookie class, because it's such a small sample game and you can overlearn a lesson and then you can make that mistake later. It's like, we shouldn't just assume Rome is going to turn into JSN next year because their first two seasons have some similarities. I think that would be pretty stupid. So I don't want to overlearn anything, but if there's one really big takeaway, I think it might be that we don't really know which players have immediate opportunity. So when we are trying to draft these players, I think the talent over situation thing really needs to be emphasized again. Because we thought, think about the argument in favor of immediate opportunity. We start with RJ Harvey, right? He goes in the second round to a team where the only running backs are Audric Estime, who sucks, Jaleel McLaughlin, who is like a dwarf. And that was it, right? Tyler Bidet wasn't even a thought. J.K. Dobbins didn't sign with the team till July. RJ Harvey was an immediate opportunity pick. He was a 24-year-old rookie running back. I liked him as I thought he was a good prospect, but he was an older running back prospect who was being drafted this high because it's a lucrative role in the Denver Broncos backfield, and he's going to get this big workload and he's going to produce with it. Then J.K. Dobbins signs, and then J.K. Dobbins just becomes the starter, which was interesting. You look at Kyle Williams, who was drafted to the Patriots before they even had Stephon Diggs. I could be wrong about that. But you also think about Mac Hollins, who was not thought to be a factor. Kayshon Boutte was not thought to be a factor. There was talk of Kyle Williams being like a day one starter. He was being taken in like the early hundreds on Underdog for a while. Trey Harris was drafted to a Chargers team that had Ladd McConkey and what we thought was just an insane, horrible bust in Quentin Johnson and nothing else. We thought he could step right in. Jaden Higgins, same deal, like Nico Collins and what, right? They didn't even have Christian Kirk yet, I don't think. They had Xavier Hutchinson and like a bunch of bums in that wide receiver room, and yet very little immediate opportunity. Jack Besh, again, same deal. The spot opposite Jacoby Myers should have been up for grabs. He doesn't get on the field right away. So again, we don't know who gets the immediate opportunity. What we should be trying to figure out is who is good and who can demand that opportunity. That doesn't mean those things don't overlap. I thought RJ Harvey was good. I thought Trey Harris and Jaden Higgins were at least interesting good enough potentially to take spots from the lackluster competition that was there. I didn't really think that Kyle Williams was that good. And I kind of bought into him more over the offseason because I liked Drake May. I liked the opportunity. I ranked him too high. Jack Bech, I didn't really like. He was as the prospect. Again, I thought there was opportunity. I just chased the draft capital with him. So I just think it's interesting, the players that we look at and say, hey, they have all this opportunity. And maybe Matthew Golden would be the biggest one, right? Matthew Golden, finally the Packers draft a wide receiver in the first round. You know, look at the players on this team. It's not that imposing, right? There's no alpha target earner there. He can be Jordan Love's wide receiver one. Well, sure, except that he was never anybody's wide receiver one outside of like 4 games in college. He's never been a big target earner. So maybe that should have been an even bigger red flag, right? And there were people telling you he was the wide receiver one in the class. There were people saying he needed to, like, the idea of not ranking him as a first round rookie pick when look at the opportunity that he has in this offense. Obviously, I didn't buy into that too heavily. I ranked him at the end of my early second tier, but that was something a lot of people did fall into. So I think we just have to be careful about assuming who has opportunity. And on the other side, assuming which players don't have opportunity. I was initially very skeptical of Harold Fannin when he was drafted because I didn't think he would have opportunity. It wasn't until I think it was Jacob Sanderson talked about how Kevin Stefanski uses 12 personnel and how the Browns don't really have a slot receiver that I started to get, okay, I can see how this works with Fannin. I can see how he gets on the field. But initially, I didn't really want much to do with him because I didn't think he had opportunity. You look at like Aronde Gadsden, not really a guy you would have thought would have the chance to get on the field. Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, when he was drafted, the team had Brian Robinson as the first and second down back. They had Eckler as the third down back. Fast forward to week 2 of the season, both of those guys are out of the picture. And then Bill gets his chance. And obviously he flopped with that chance, but he still carried a lot of value. And probably my biggest miss in this sense was Cam Skattebo, who was drafted basically exactly where Bishal Tutin was drafted. But I kind of arbitrarily decided that ETN and Bigsby were more surmountable competition than Tyrone Tracy. And that was stupid. Now I do want to rehash that take for a second because part of the take was, well, Liam Cohen as a new coach doesn't have any loyalty to this current backfield. Both of them showed, that they had limitations last year. They drafted Tutin. And the upside of this offense, if it's anything like Liam Cohen's Buccaneers offense, is really, really high. So we want to be attached to that. Whereas Skattebo was coming into a situation where Tracy had the same coach as the year before, Brian Daboll. And I thought maybe there'd be more loyalty there. And also I projected it to be a worse offense. Now, a lot of that stuff ended up just being wrong. The Jaguars offense wasn't as good because Lawrence isn't as good. The personnel with the wide receivers wasn't as good. The Giants offense hasn't been amazing, but Dart has been a hit, and then we should have factored in some upside with him. And there was just enough fantasy value to be funneled to running backs. And most importantly, Skattebo was just good enough that even without an injury, even with him getting injured, he was able to come back, steal that job away from Tracy entirely, and take over that backfield. So it was stupid that I put him a tier behind Tutin, even though I think it was defensible to have Tutin ahead. There was no reason to have them in different tiers. And I think that was, just like arrogant and just kind of overlooking what Skattebo could bring to the table, especially with his fantasy friendly skill set. So that's one I definitely would take the L on that. Having him ahead of behind Jack Bech. I even took Kyle Williams over him in one of my rookie drafts, which is just so stupid. So those are some takeaways. Another couple quick ones, or maybe I actually probably only have one more good one. When it comes to those 3rd and 4th round rookie picks, I do think, if you're taking shots on day 3 running backs, which is what you want to do, like every year we see taking shots on the late running backs just works out way better than the late wide receivers, like every single time. This year, though, I just wasn't diversifying enough. I just kept taking the same guys. I kept taking DJ Giddens. I took a bunch of DJ Giddens. I took a bunch of Jarquez Hunter. And those guys just haven't done anything. I took Taj Brooks in a number of drafts. Those guys haven't done anything. They were the ones I thought were the most interesting based on where they landed and their prospect profiles. And the guy that I didn't take outside of one rookie draft, and actually I don't even know if I drafted him. I think I might have traded for him. Yeah, I traded for him later. Kyle Monangai has been arguably the biggest day 3 hit this year. I didn't really draft, well, other than Scadaboo, but he wasn't priced that way. Biggest like late rookie draft hit has been Monangai. I didn't draft Monangai in a single league, and I know I had opportunities. I just kept clicking the guys that I liked more ahead of him. I think you do want to diversify. If you only have a handful of leagues, you kind of have to pick your favorites. But if you have the opportunity to mix and match, you probably want to take shots on a lot of these day 3 backs, because it is often fairly unpredictable which ones hit. And like, it's not that hard to see how Monangai panned out. Like Roshan Johnson has always sucked. DeAndre Swift has always been a limited player. Monangai handled a heavy workload in college. He offered an element that this backfield didn't have with Swift. And Ben Johnson was coming over from, leading the most effective rushing attack in the NFL. Obviously, having Gibbs and Montgomery helps, but like, we should have expected that, hey, Ben Johnson could probably scheme up a running back room, and hey, Monangai is looking a little bit Montgomery-esque. So that was a guy that I shouldn't have overlooked as easily as I did. And then also Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, who I don't think I drafted in a single rookie draft. I picked him up on waivers in a couple leagues, but I wasn't nearly as aggressive in targeting him, I guess, as I should have been. So you don't want to miss out on those big winners. Ultimately, you should value having a lot of late round picks when you can. Don't think of them as just sweeteners and deals, even though they can be good for that. Don't, scoff at them as like throw-ins into trades. That you do want a lot of those late round picks, because the more you have, the more likely you are to hit on somebody like Oronde Gadsden. Nico says should have diversified at tight end. You shouldn't have diversified at tight end. You should have just taken Gadsden in every draft, which, like, low key, I kind of did. And that really went well. Oh, yeah, Woody Marks. I totally didn't even think about that. You know why I didn't think of Woody Marks? Because I literally didn't draft him in a single league. I laughed at Woody Marks. I laughed in his face. This guy, this old running back prospect who was just like a satellite back in college and can't run, and, he's behind Joe Mixon. What's the upside here with Woody Marks? We don't know anything about how these guys are going to pan out. We really don't. So yeah, Woody Marks for sure. Monangai, Devin Neal is getting his moment. I didn't mind Neal as a late pick. Ollie Gordon. Sometimes these guys get priced up where it doesn't make sense to draft them. Like Jaden Blue got really priced up. He was going in the late second of a lot of mine. And I did not mess around with that at all. I wasn't interested in that. Because people were chasing him. They were chasing opportunity that wasn't there with Jaden Blue. People were chasing opportunity and it was not there. It doesn't make sense. But with Woody Marks, Monangai, these guys were going late. They were priced appropriately, right? They were these 4th round picks largely. And yeah, we should have been on that. I shouldn't have been taking Jarquez Hunter at every opportunity as the RB3 for the Rams, just because I don't like Kyron Williams. So that is worth noting. I tried to think about Oronde Gadsden and whether there was anything to be learned there, and I'm not exactly sure what the lesson is. I mean, he's an archetype of tight end that, for the most part, we've kind of seen not phased out, I guess, but like limited in fantasy. Kyle Pitts, Dalton Kincaid, those guys that are like these in between tight end / wide receiver hybrids. and the Chargers have just decided to make that guy an every down player. Now, I think when the opportunity cost is a 4th round pick, it's a lot easier to take a bet on, hey, this is like an early declare. I think he was an early declare, like really productive college player who has like really great size and athleticism and is going to a fairly ambiguous situation. I think it made a lot of sense to take shots on him at his price, even though this type of hit was not really foreseeable. It wasn't hard. I guess it wasn't that hard to picture him usurping someone like Will Dissly or Tyler Conklin and at least getting enough hype to be worth like a 2nd round pick. Right. So yeah, I think Gadsden, like maybe that's the lesson with Gadsden. I don't know. It's tough. Again, there's not always going to be a lesson. Sometimes you just try to do your best to find the good players, and sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't. Yeah, I do remember Dylan Sampson. That was a weird minute where we thought Judkins might just not come back, and suddenly it was like, oh my gosh, you have to get Dylan Sampson, and he's actually good. Like I think he's genuinely good. I wish he was used a little bit more when Judkins was on the field. I think they would be better if they were in more of a split backfield rather than Judkins just doing everything, because I think Judkins is really good. He's the better pure rusher, but Sampson is a little bit like faster, a little bit more of that breakaway speed and good pass catcher. So still an interesting guy to stash for sure. All right. So that's all I've got in terms of looking back at the rookie class, what went right, what went wrong. Let me show this trade that I made. And if you guys have any other questions for today, just like throw them out there, please, because I am just about done here. All right. This is a trade I made today in a league where the trade deadline is coming up. And I realize now that I should have pulled up the team for context. So let me do that. In this league, I am currently the 2 seed. My record, it's a median league. I'm 19-5. I know I sent the trade earlier, but I didn't like talk about it, and not everybody checks the trade channel. Anyway, Dynasty Daddy has my team ranked number 1 in value. I think Fantasy Calc has me at 2. I'm 19-5 as the 2 seed. And there's a team behind me that's 18-6. So it's very tight. He has slightly higher points for than me. So like if we have the same record at the end of the year, there's a good chance he would get the bye. So I really need to win and hit the median each of the next 2 weeks to get that bye. And then obviously I want to win the championship. As it stands right now, my team is Josh Allen, Caleb Williams, Matthew Stafford. Now I have Achane. Before it was Harvey, Dowdle, Warren, Tracy, Gainwell. So just kind of an army of like really mid running backs. And then I had Puka, McMillan, Igbuka, Flowers, Diggs. And I was rocking Jawan Johnson in the tight end 1 spot, TJ Hawkinson, and JT Sanders. So I was able to upgrade my tight end 1 from Jawan Johnson to George Kittle. And I was able to upgrade my running back 1, I guess running back 1 in quotes, from RJ Harvey to Devon Achane. And so I think I'm losing this trade on value. Like Igbuka is a great asset. He's, I think, the most valuable asset here. He will definitely be in the offseason, but I'm already number 1 in value. And I think these 2 pieces materially improve my odds, right? You're talking about multiple points per game difference at tight end. You're talking about potentially like 5 or 6 points per game difference at running back. And Igbuka is not producing to a level that I'm concerned about missing out on right now. It's not really a downgrade to say, hey, I'm going to play Diggs or Flowers instead. So this just felt like a move that made sense to me. I think it gives me enough of a boost in win equity without really sacrificing any future seasons. So I think it qualifies as a good deadline buy. So I just wanted to show that. to you. Question from Austin. Can you discuss what you like to do coming out of a rebuild? Oh yeah, you did mention this before. If you have 3 or 4 young studs, 3 to 4 firsts, 3 to 4 seconds. So I'm not really that worried right now. I wouldn't be worried right now about that. Like 3 to 4 studs surrounded by whatever the cheapest pieces you can get. Like that's already probably good enough to be a playoff team if those studs actually produce like studs. And you're going to have opportunities to make trades. I think in the early offseason, you can kind of test the waters. As soon as the season is over, there are going to be teams that are like, all right, I'm packing it up. I want to rebuild, get these old guys off my team. And you might be able to find somebody that's worth buying where you could trade a second or you could trade a first and feel like you're getting a really good piece at a good price. Like the offseason that I started this channel, Derrick Henry was still on the Titans, and it was like people didn't know where he was going to play in the future. He had kind of had, I guess he had like a slight down season. I don't really remember. People were trading him for second round picks, like mid second round picks. And that was a good time to buy in the early offseason. It doesn't there's not like an exact buy window for every player all the time. It's just like, you have to kind of see where people are at narrative wise, right? Like Devontae Adams after his Jets season was really cheap in startups, and then he goes to the Rams and it's like, oh my gosh, like Devontae Adams is back, and then he becomes expensive. So you just have to, I think you want to be vigilant with those assets and like look for opportunities to buy. Otherwise you can just wait until those picks are at their peak hype season, right? April, maybe right post draft, during the rookie draft, and you can see if there are good deals available. If not, I'm totally fine just drafting rookies with every single one of those picks, because then you have the entire summer for hype pieces to come out about those players, people to like talk themselves into these rookies. They're going to just build and build and build, or teams over the course of the summer will decide like, you know what, my team's not good enough. I'm not going to compete this year. Basically, you just have, you hold all the cards with all these picks. And the answer to like what you should do is just entirely dictated by when are your league mates going to be ready to play ball? Because at some point they will. And if that's early off season, great. If that is in the rookie draft, great. If it's in the summer, great. I make trades at all those times of the year, just depending on what people want to do. But you don't need to like panic and overpay for veterans at any point. You can just kind of let these things come to you. And again, you can just draft a million rookies. I did that in one of my leagues, one of my best ball leagues. And then I think I traded some picks like out into the future. I drafted a bunch of rookies. And then early in the season, I took a couple losses, and eventually other people did too. And then I traded like a bunch of pieces for, you know, Nico Collins, Devontae Adams, Devonta Smith, AJ Brown. I just bought a bunch of players, and now I'm like the 3 seed. So you just want to be patient. Deals will come up. How do you know if your team's going to be a contender next year? You don't. I go into the season with like maybe a third of my teams just labeled as like TBD, like we'll see, you know, because there's a lot. Think about what we thought going into the season gets thrown out the window by week 2, week 3. There are players we think are going to be awesome for us that suck. There are players that come out of nowhere and are awesome. You don't really know. I mean, if you have like a really, really good team, you know. And if you have a really, really bad team, you know. But if you have a team that's kind of in the middle, you can just go into the season and see what happens. There's no reason to just decide you're tanking before the season starts. If it does start and your players don't score points, then yeah, maybe you tank. But yeah, like I don't think you should just decide to tank in April unless the exception is like if your team is like 10th in value and you can clearly see you don't have the star talent to win, then yeah, you probably know like, okay, I'm going to be rebuilding this next year because I don't have the buying power to realistically put a team together, and I don't already have all the pieces in place to make that work. Yeah, so like in the Ottoman League, I could pull up that league right now because I'm in it. You are third. You're actually third in overall value, which is interesting to me, at least on Dynasty Daddy. I suspect you'll be first by the time those picks really mature in value. But yeah, I would say with the amount of value you have, like you have 5 first-round picks, you have Bowers, you have Tet, you have Hunter. He's probably something. I would say you should think that you're going to give it a chance. You don't need to. Yeah, like you already don't have players. So like there's really nothing, like you can say I'm tanking in April, but like it doesn't really mean anything. It's not like you're moving production off of your team. I think you should probably just be mindful of what the league is giving you. If there are people that are going to trade away good assets at a discount, and you can be the beneficiary of that because you have a bunch of picks, I think you should be open to that. If that doesn't happen, draft 1 million rookies and just be patient and go into the season and see what happens. And like, I don't know. I think generally speaking, if you have a top 3 value team, you should probably want to be competitive in that season. I think it's just, you're being a little bit too loose with the opportunities that you have to compete and win money if you're not trying to compete in that scenario. Doesn't mean it's always going to work out, but I wouldn't just assume you're not going to compete next year. I think it's totally possible that this team could be really, really good. We just don't know. You're going to add Jeremiah Love to it. Speaking of Nico, are you always taking Love at 101? It's too early to know that. It just depends where he goes. It depends where other players go in that early first round. I right now, I would guess that there won't be a ton of situations where I draft a different player at 101. Like I'm guessing if I'm at 101, I'm going to take Jeremiah Love. But yeah, there are situations where I'd be willing to trade back. First of all, just what am I being offered to trade back, right? Is it a strong, if it's enough value, I'm going to trade back. Like, especially if I'm picking up 2027 first, I think that would be the biggest thing. Can I trade back within the first round and get a 27 first? That seems pretty appealing. You're going to want to pack up those 27 firsts if you can. But otherwise, like, yeah, trading back is very team dependent. Am I a shallow, low value team where I need multiple bets to try to pick up value? Like if I have a shallow roster that's going to have trouble competing anyway with or without Love, I'm probably going to explore trading back and like, can I get the 104 and the 111? Because then I can take 2 guys that might have more potential to gain value. Because as we've seen this year, Genty for me is still the 101, and I think consensus is still the 101 or close to it. But if you drafted, Tyler Warren, if you traded Genty for Tyler Warren and Emeka Egbuka, you won on value. You got 2 massive value risers that are together worth a lot more, obviously, than just Genty. So I think it makes sense to trade back in a low value situation. If you know you're not going to compete this year and you have the 101, then by all means. Otherwise, yeah, I mean, I like taking the best players if I can. The only other thing would be like portfolio considerations. If you play in a lot of leagues and you just happen to, you probably don't want to draft Jeremiah Love in a bunch of leagues and not have any of Tyson or Lemon or whoever's going at 2, 3, 4. That's maybe not the best plan because it doesn't go that way every time. All right. Last thing, and then I'm going to close this thing off for the night. I mentioned at the top, I wanted to share some things from Jacob Sanderson's article. This was an article about deadline buys. So these are just some of his takeaways I thought were really interesting. The first one is what happens in leagues that don't have deadlines and why I have become somebody that is very pro trade deadline, even though most of my leagues still don't have them. Basically, if there's no deadline, then teams are actually incentivized, at least meant like psychologically incentivized to pay the most for assets in the playoffs because there are less variables. So it's easier to know like what are your chances to win and how much are those odds increased by making a trade. The more information you have and the more you are emotionally invested and the more that the money is so close and so visible, the more likely people are to overpay. And so people are incentivized to pay the most in the playoffs. And that means a lot of managers might be incentivized to just not make trades leading up to the playoffs. They're not trying as hard to improve leading up to the playoffs because they don't need to yet, right? Especially in leagues where maybe there's more of a separation between the contenders and the top teams know they're making the playoffs. It doesn't really matter. So it can actually kill trade activity. But then you get into the playoffs, right? Let's say the round one of the playoffs ends and then, okay, you have 4 teams left. Okay, maybe those teams now they want to make trades, make sure they win the semifinals and get to the finals. But who has the best players available for trade? The teams that just lost. The 2 teams that just lost in the playoffs, they probably have the best win now pieces available. And so those teams actually are in the best position to benefit from the remaining teams making a trade. And then the same thing happens in the finals. You have 2 teams in the finals. They might want to make a buy. The teams that just lost in the semifinals probably have the best pieces, right? Maybe they have Christian McCaffrey, somebody like that, Devontae Adams. And because there's only 2 teams left, there's not that many trade opportunities available. And so who's most likely to benefit? Those teams that have the best players. So basically what this means is the teams at the bottom, the non-contenders, they can actually just get screwed because they don't have a chance to really move a lot of the pieces that they would like to trade. And the teams that just kind of went all in or like went heavily after the championship are getting bailed out by these late season trades. So what this means basically is that in a non-deadline league, you are far more incentivized to just try to win. As he says in the article, the clear-cut best path is to go all gas, no brakes all year in hopes of winning the league. And then if you get eliminated, you can probably sell off your best pieces at significant premiums and still come out ahead. Now, that might be a little bit of an oversimplification, but I definitely have noticed that I should say I have started to be a little bit more aggressive in leagues that don't have trade deadlines and maybe making a better plan to for what I want to do with my team in the leagues where I can't. I don't know how common it is to allow trades through the playoffs. It kind of depends what type of people you play with. I have a lot of leagues with like dynasty sickos that generally want trades all the time. And so a lot of my leagues have been set up without deadlines at all. I think all trades should be done either this week or next week. I think that would be the ideal. Week 13 or week 14 trade deadline, I think, is good. And I think that should be the norm. And I think it's probably the norm in over half of dynasty leagues, but I don't really know for sure. Now, the other thing I thought was really interesting, he kind of broke down when you should make win now trades into like some pretty reasonable rules. So I have talked about on the channel the idea of diminishing returns, where you don't want to just go buy a million old players because at a certain point you cannot increase your odds of winning anymore. You have maxed them out. But I think it's also important to do the same thing with value. So yes, the Yellow Dog teams, if you guys don't know, Yella, one of the league winning members, he's a great guy. I think he's awesome. He has a tendency to hoard value, picks, rookies, and not really want to pony up for production unless he's sending Puka Nacua and 2 firsts for Malik Neighbors. He'd love to do that. But otherwise, doesn't really want to pony up. And I think there's also diminishing returns when it comes to accumulating roster value. So what Jacob says in the article is that his theory is that the incentive to buy players based on your team's buying power and your incentive to buy based on your team's current production are reverse bell curves. So they work in opposite relationships to each other. So when it comes to production, the teams that are most incentivized to buy are teams where the impact of a single player is going to be the largest. So there are a couple situations here. One, if you have a team that is very studs and duds, where your team is being carried by like JSN and Josh Allen and Jonathan Taylor, you're probably going to benefit more from a deadline buy because you're going to be replacing a lower level piece in your lineup. Like maybe you're starting Parker Washington or something. That is going to be more meaningful than a team that's more like spread out and has like really solid pieces across the board. If you already have 15-point projections in every spot, then upgrading from like Jalen Waddle is not going to do much for you. But the other thing is about production in general, right? So if you have a team that is maybe going to make the playoffs, but just isn't productive, like maybe you're way behind everyone else in points, don't think that you're going to win the championship because you make one deadline trade. Like you're not going to be able to buy enough production to overcome the fact that you have a pretty bad team. So an unproductive team should not be trying to make a lot of deadline buys because you're probably not going to win anyway. So you shouldn't hurt your team long-term with that buy. On the other hand, if you have a very productive team, like you have the number one team in the league by far with points, your win equity is already about as high as it can go. You're going to be the 1 seed. You're going to have a really high projection. There's no reason for you to go out and make a deadline buy either because you've pretty much maxed out your production. So it's like, in terms of production, you want to be kind of in the middle. The teams that are kind of in the middle are the ones that are going to benefit the most from those deadline buys. When it comes to buying power, it's the opposite relationship. What he says is the teams that are in the middle, this is actually probably the most interesting. The teams that are in the middle in terms of value, kind of average value teams, are the ones that are least incentivized to make buys. And the reason for this is because a team that's kind of middling in value, you're towing the line, right, between whether you're going to have to contend or rebuild in the future. And making these deadline buys where generally you're giving up value could genuinely be the difference between whether you have another contending season or you have to rebuild prematurely. And the cost of losing a competitive season is extremely high. I mean, it's a massive price to pay. And so he says the teams least incentivized to buy from a value standpoint are those with average buying power. Those are the class of teams where adding win now pieces for futures is most likely to send you into a rebuild sooner than necessary or force you into a longer rebuild than you would have needed otherwise. So it's actually, for buying power, if you have a really low value team, but that is actually good this year, like maybe you have Adams and you have Henry and you have Stafford, you have these older players that are really productive, McCaffrey, that are all going to lose value, this is probably your best chance to win before a rebuild. So you're going to rebuild anyway, go ahead and send some future value away now to maximize this season because you're already not going to be competitive next year. And if you have a ton of buying power, shout out to Yella or like my team in the league where I showed you a trade, don't be so stingy with that value because giving up some of that value can help you now and is probably not going to cost you a season in the future. It's probably not going to be enough to make you a rebuilder because you have so much value. So I thought that was really cool. And he kind of summarized it all. Like if you have low buying power, but high productive value, buy. Just don't send your 27 picks away. If you have high buying power and lower production, buy because you can afford it. If you have high buying power and you have high production, just hold. You don't need to do anything else. If you have low buying power and you have low productive value, then you sell because you're not going to win this year and you'd like to get ahead of next year. So all of that. And then the last note that he had was that he's actually being more aggressive about this deadline buys this year because he thinks that the perception about the 2026 class, whether it's true or not, is going to impact the market value of picks. And 2027 picks just have so much more hype behind them. And so basically, if you're in a situation where you are choosing between competing this year and tanking next year, or vice versa, just tank next year, because accumulating those picks is probably going to do a lot more for you, especially the early picks, than the other way around. So in the long run, tanking next year is probably a more lucrative situation to be in than tanking in 2025. So anyway, hope you guys thought that stuff was interesting. This was a fun conversation. I'm sure there was some useful stuff in it. I'm going to wrap this up because this has been one of our longer streams actually in a while. Hopefully you guys can get some wins in week 13, lock up some bye weeks. I'm glad that the Eagles have already lost this week, so I don't have to worry about that, and I can just worry about my fantasy teams tomorrow. Hope you all have a good night, and I will talk to you soon.